guys, I know it's been a while since my last upload, but what can I say? I've got a toddler, and making YouTube videos is actually incredibly demanding. So I wanted to make one today, though, because I had a request from a friend of mine about something specific to Taijiquan practice, or Tai Chi practice, however you like to call it. Um, Recently, I posted an article on my Substack account, which is called Immortality Study, um, about opening up some new ideas in the practice of Taijiquan stepping. So basically, Taiji has a lot of traditional principles that you may have heard of. But at the same time, it's also possible to think of new ideas and, sort of play around with different ways of practicing that may be also in keeping with traditional principles, or sometimes may adventurously leave behind the traditional principles for the sake of trying to learn something new. The point of the article was basically just to say, hey, don't be too closed-minded about this stuff. We can learn a lot by looking at different ideas in practice, learning new things, maybe studying like the nervous system, or studying physiology or kinesiology, or these kind of things, right? Taiji and Kung Fu or Gong Fu or Wushu in general kind of lack an element of sports science, which I feel kind of keeps them behind relative to other genres, like, let's say, competition fighting or soccer or weightlifting, right, or bodybuilding, or track, right? Any of these different sports that have lots and lots of scientific research going into them, that use sports science and kinesiology very effectively to help their athletes train. In Taiji, we don't really talk about that, right? It tends to be the case that people either are completely ignorant about the idea that they could use their bodies better, or they sort of just cleave on to what they believe to be traditional theory and they never make any progress. So my article over on Substack was basically just saying, hey, you could think in new ways, so here's some new ways to think. And it was on the subject of tracking. So what I mean by tracking is things like, tracking the movement of the hand with the eyes, or doing things like imagining that you have a tail, like a tail growing out of your tailbone, which is allowing you to keep your balance between steps, or things like imagining that your ear allows you to keep your balance when you're standing on one leg. Like, for instance, when your weight is on your back leg, you could imagine, if your back leg is your right leg, you could imagine that your left ear, or your right ear is, rooting into the ground under the foot that you're standing on, or this kind of thing. And all of these things, if you understand how to do them and put them together, then you will radically improve your balance, and therefore make your Taiji stepping more beautiful. So that was the sort of gist of the article. And so a friend of mine sent me an email and said, this is cool, but could you maybe expand on it a bit? So I thought that rather than writing another article, I would just make a little video and maybe show a little instead of just say. So we're going to look at a couple of clips here, and they're just going to be slow motion clips of me doing Taiji. I never said I was a Taiji master, right? I'm more or less a passionate student, just like the majority of you guys. I do teach a bit too, but don't expect to see perfection. It's just going to be me bumbling my way through the middle yang routine that I learned in Shanghai from Master Yin. But having said that, I wanted to illustrate a couple of points about this tracking idea. Now, I don't think you ever see the term tracking anywhere in the Taiji classics, right? It's sort of a term that I'm just using myself to infer that you could use different body parts and different intentions in order to develop a sense of keeping in track with movement. And so the two aspects of tracking that I want to show you in this video are going to be tracking with the eyes. So in this case, I'm going to show the movement peng, or ward off, and show how to use the eyes in order to facilitate the strength of the movement. And then in the other movement, I'm going to show tracking with the waist and the tailbone. So by waist, I mean like the lower back area. And then, of course, by tailbone, I mean the tailbone. And in these two videos, basically what I want to illustrate is that whole body motion and spinal integrity is maintained by multiple processes working at the same time. So Taijiquan is not an art where you have one principle and you omit other principles. It's an art where you gradually have to learn how to apply a whole bunch of principles at once. And that makes it really difficult because you're doing like 50 different things within one movement all at the same time. The other thing about Taiji is that if you do it passably well, then one of the things that will happen is your back will relax. And as Zheng Manqing, or Shen Manqing, however you like to say it, said in his analysis of the classical documents, it seems like the spine is like a string of pearls, right? And so the idea here of the spine being a string of pearls is that, oh, by the way, I got this cool track jacket I made. This says Wu Tu. It means like Wu means like a kind of a yang earth. Wu Tu means yang earth, and then Ji Tu means yin earth. Anyway, I just thought I would tell you what those insignia on my jacket say. It's Taoist stuff. Anyway, so where was I? So this idea of the string of pearls, and the idea of the string of pearls is when you hang it, if you were to move it, it just goes wherever the whole string follows a kinetic chain, right? And so when the back relaxes, the spine behaves in that same kind of way. It's a kinetic chain which is attached to the movement of the rest of the body. The body being, tucking the chin in slightly so that the top of the head is imagining it's being pulled up from, the sky, and then sinking the hips and the waist down, so that the spine stretches outward. And then when you're turning and you're shifting your weight and stuff, the spine just moves naturally. The thing is, though, in Taiji movement, if that chain, right, which is a kind of kinetic chain, if it breaks, for instance, I turn my head to the exclusion of the rest of my body, and it's not carried by, right, the movement of the waist, the relaxation and turning of the dantian and all of these things, then what that does is it changes the structure of the spine so that it gets tension at some point in that chain, and then it's not able to facilitate the power outward as effectively. So a lot of the practice of Taiji is just getting those little, small, annoying details that will facilitate the spine moving smoothly throughout the entire movement. So when I'm doing this tracking idea, what I'm trying to do actually is incorporate all these different ideas, like the position of the lower back and the tailbone and the chin, and like moving with the chin and the body at the same time, and even moving the forehead to be able to facilitate power, or sometimes imagining I'm moving from the nose or from the eyes or the forehead, relative to the sinking of the weight, and so on and so forth, right? And then all of the different kind of turning motions that require the waist and the tailbone and so on. Probably about 20, 30 plus things, all in each individual movement, and they change relative to the structure of the movement and the requirements of that structure, right? And so when you do Taiji, that's how you should think. So let's have a look at our first clip, which is tracking with the eyes. Okay, so the dot obviously is to show you where I'm looking. So the eye part's pretty easy to understand, right? Like, you don't necessarily have to look at your hand. You could look at an imaginary opponent. You could look at a real opponent, right? There's many, many different ways you can practice, and Taiji is not limited to one school of thought. But the basic idea here is that the eyes are tracking something during the movement. But what I said in the article is that I found that there's two approximate modes of tracking with the eyes. Now, the first thing is that human beings are an interesting animal, right? You tell me what you think, but I've heard that we're descended from primates. And one of the really fascinating things about animals in general, right, humans being a member of the animal kingdom, is that there tend to be predatory animals and there tend to be prey animals. And for the most part, predatory animals tend to have eyes more or less on the front of their heads. And so those eyes allow them to basically make an intention and take a bead on something that they want to eat, right? They're the prey animal. But on the other hand, prey animals tend to have their eyes more sort of situated to the sides of their head, right? So think about a deer, for instance. And that allows them to have a much wider sort of breadth of vision, or a range of field. And that range of vision is one of the things that allows them to see predatory animals trying to creep up on them, right? So the interesting thing about humans is our eyes are approximately situated toward the front of the head, but we do also have this wide range of vision because we're also to some extent a prey animal. And if you don't believe it, well, I invite you to go to any place that's largely populated by polar bears. I think there's only one. But anyway, the basic idea here being that you have both the ability to focus the eyes and make an intention, and you also have the ability for the eyes to be general. And those two skills may be useful for you at different phases of a movement. So in the movement I showed, the eyes are basically focusing on the hand going out in ward off. But at the same time, in a back-weighted posture, like hold the ball or something where you're on one foot, it could be that the eyes are generally focused, or sort of left generally aware of the environment, or it could be that they're focused on something, right? It depends on what the intention of the technique is. But I like playing with the idea of going back and forth between having a focus when the power comes out, and then at times which are transitional movements or a little bit more neutral, not to focus as sharply because the power hasn't finished its trajectory yet, or it's just finished and it's just getting ready to start another trajectory, right? So that's something that I've personally been playing with the eye focus, is to be able to have a general field and a more focused field, which would be sort of playing between those ideas of being on the attack and then being ready to receive in a defensive posture, keeping in mind that a lot of Taijiquan practice is about being receptive to the power of an opponent, so that then we're able to transform the power and give it back to them, rather than using a large amount of our own power to attempt to sort of go, full on against them. That's sort of the special feature of Taijiquan. So I think that idea of having the ability to shift between receptivity and a more aggressive posture is a really, really good idea. And the eyes are one of the easiest places to study that. Now later you'll study it with your chi, and by chi I mean just basically your overall feeling of the way the force works, both in personal practice and with a partner. So that's sort of a brief idea of the eyes. In the next one, I want to show a little bit about the movement of the waist. In Chinese, waist yao means like the lower back area basically, and the tailbone, right? So the waist and the tailbone are extraordinarily important points in Taiji practice. Any person who practices Taiji, even at a basic level, should work on having waist or back flexibility, because the bulk of the movement of the dantian, the lower abdomen area, moves in concert with the relaxation and transformation of the lower back. So let's have a look at that. Okay, so you can see, I just can't get that. My hair never works. Anyway, you can see that what's happening there is that as the hand goes back, right, I sink into the back foot, but I don't just sink into the back foot, right? This is a common illness of Taiji people in certain styles. They tend to really lack hip flexibility or hip motion, really. A lot of people just have side to side and forward and back movement, but they don't really have the ability to move back and rotate the hip while they go back. So you can see in the backward going hand motion, right, my chin and my waist and my back all move in concert with the sinking of the weight and the shifting back and the turning. And then when the hand comes, what initiates the movement is that the hip turns the tailbone, which rocks the waist, which allows the power to go through the chest and out the arm, and then to be delivered again through another sinking motion as the hands come out into the press posture. So that one is, as you can see, it's a little harder to explain, but basically my idea there is it's almost like my hips and tailbone are sort of connected with a tail or something like that. Like I'm swinging my tail as I go. So there's like a rocking motion and a turning. It's very, very comfortable. It relaxes my entire back, especially my Mingmen area. And that's a major feature of certain elements of Taiji, right? Not every style expresses it exactly the same way, but at the same time, there's no styles that just go forward and back and side to side, right? Every style has to have three-dimensional movement where three-dimensional movement is appropriate. And for the hip girdle, I mean, it's just a pity if you can't move it in a way that rotates and sinks and rises and falls, and where there's a lot of flexibility moving in the lower back, right? All of that stuff is what comes out through the top. So when people talk about the waist being the mechanism by which the force is delivered from the ground to the hands, a lot of it is in that idea. And so the ability to even have a physical dantian worth speaking of is partially derived from, well, majorly derived from that activity of the waist, meaning the lower back in this regard, being able to relax, the tailbone being able to have its own, freedom of movement so that the sacrum opens, right? And the funny thing is a lot of people, when they're studying Taiji, when the sacrum first starts opening and the lower back first start opening, they actually will the tissue in there is a little tight. So sometimes they even sort of get a free chiropractic treatment. It can be very nice. And that gradually relaxes the upper regions, like the shoulders and stuff like that. And so that whole kinetic chain is based on the idea of being able to move the waist and the tailbone in that sort of rocking motion where it changes a few times. And you can see there's a spiral just before the pressing motion, just before G, where the hip direction actually changes before the force comes out, right? And so Master Yin taught me that one. That's a really, really useful tool when you're practicing push hands, for instance, because it allows you to change the force when a person is pushing into you, so that you don't turn in a predictable way, right? In push hands, you usually people would expect you, if they push on the left, you turn to the left. Well, in this case, you sort of go back. You make a little circle, and then you can go straight forward. I like to think of it sort of like driving a stick shift, right? I don't know if you've ever done that. It's not very fashionable anymore, but I don't make that much money doing this stuff, to be honest. And so I was driving a little 2008 Toyota Echo for a long time until it broke down, and then I replaced it with an automatic. So thank goodness for that. But in any event, it's that sort of same idea of this three-dimensional mobility that's going on in the lower body. And there's so much more to it. It's really hard to put it all in one place. But yeah, those were approximately the ideas I wanted to share about this tracking concept. When the classics say things like, the waist is the commander and all this kind of stuff, or even like the mind is the commander of the chi, you have to look into it really multidimensionally. It's not sufficient just to say, well, the waist is the commander of the chi, therefore I have to turn my waist. And you see a lot of people do that. They don't even know what the waist is, right? So they end up turning at the tailor's waist on the side of their body, but that's not what waist means in Taiji practice. Waist means basically the lower back and that whole area, right? The whole sort of belt area, including the lower back. And then, with the addition of the coccyx, which is called the weiwu, right? So this is the part of the body that allows the legs to connect to the upper body so that the entire movement of the spine can be facilitated and open and relaxed. So anyway, you know what? I've been making this video for a while. I'm kind of tired. So I'm going to knock it off and stop here. And I'm not promising I'm going to come back anytime soon to YouTube here. I write at Substack. I will put the link get my finger in there. How do I do that? There we go. I will put the link in the description of the video to the article I was talking about in Substack, so you can read it if you have some spare time. Yeah, I'll come back at some point when I have something else to say. I'm not trying to become a YouTube superstar, so I just make these videos once in a while for fun and when I have something to say. If you liked the music in the video or you didn't like the music in the video, I made it. I am learning arrangement for bass guitar and piccolo bass. So my apologies for being amateurish, but I figured it's a lot more fun to use my own music than to use that, royalty free or whatever, or take a risk with the content strike. So anyway, tell me what you think in the comments if you want. Talk about Taiji. I'm up for a little chat. I don't check in on this channel all the time. It's not really my main thing. My main thing is writing. I'm much better at that than this. Yeah, I'm always happy to come here and chat a little bit about qigong or taiji or meditation or whatever. If you have any requests, throw them in the comments, and if it's interesting to me, I'll do it. And if it's not, I won't. Okay, cool. See you next time. Thanks for tuning in. I'm Rob, Qigong Project. Like and subscribe if you want, I guess. All right, toodle.